So after the first parts where we saw the evolution of the Roman Empire, where it began with its pagan cult at those times and how it's transformed to our times today throughout a secret society organization, and it continues today working in the same manner, taking people to the great deception on this world. So let's take a look at this god Mithra, which is in the British Museum. Curiously, it's right in front of the number 33 glass window. Many will know that it is one of the highest levels in Freemasonry and secret societies. And at the top we can see that Phrygian cap, which is the symbol that we will be following up to our days today. This is a Facebook page of a Freemason lodge, and it says here, Sol Invictus, which means unconquered sun, is a solar deity revered in the Roman Empire. On the left is identical as the Eucharistic utensils that are used for the Mass, but this is satanic symbolism. And isn't it a coincidence to see how it is the same symbol of the Jesuits? So this goddess had this form, but as we can see here, she had a crown. She was queen, and today we have another queen. And don't you see her with the same rays as Mithras, the same sun worship rays around her head, and the eight-pointed star? The eight-pointed star is the star of Ishtar. And what does Anahita have beside her? Lions. Just like Ishtar, the Babylonian goddess, that also was on top of lions. And what does she have on her sides also? Owls. They both have wings. It's the same representation of the goddess. Anahita has one breast discovered. Ishtar is completely naked. Why? Because these were goddesses of sexual perversion. Isn't this the same hat that Mithra wore also? That we saw was involved in the Mithraic cult that eventually evolved into the Catholic Church? Was Catholicism involved in the French Revolution? Was Catholicism involved in its own fall that was prophesied in the Bible? They used the Jacobins also. What do we see at the top of the symbol of the Jacobins? Once again, the Phrygian cap. What do we see here at the top? The Phrygian cap. Liberty, equality, fraternity. It's the same slogan as the Freemasonic lodges. This symbol is relating us precisely to that Mithraic cult, that secret society. And what is she doing? She is stepping on top of a Christ with a red boot. Isn't there someone that was famous for wearing always red shoes? And I'm not talking about Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. I'm talking about the Pope. So after the first parts where we saw the evolution of the Roman Empire, where it began with its pagan cult at those times and how it's transformed to our times today throughout a secret society organization, and it continues today working in the same manner, taking people to the great deception on this world, to be able to make all the kings and nations go to obey this power, this beast which is mentioned in Revelation. So let's move back to where we were at the beginning of Catholicism. Constantine the Great, we mentioned him, Roman Emperor from 306 AD to 337 AD. In Wikipedia says that he was the one that organized the first council of Nicaea, in Spanish it said Nicea, where they organized and structured the Christian doctrine. And through that, obviously, they infiltrated certain things that are not true and that are being accepted by most Protestant and Catholic, obviously, different denominations and different ramifications of Christianism. And it says here in the Pontifical University of Salamanca, the union of church and state. It says, let us therefore open the pages of history and discover the Christians of past generations at the culminating and most prosperous moments of their centuries-long development. If history is the teacher of life, we can learn from it what it teaches us about this problem of such transcendence. This will be the subject of our exposition. The union of church and state, as presented in history, says, the church's ideal of union with the state persists. That is a state that is deeply Christian in its individuals, in its institutions, and its decisive support for the church. This is the main goal of the Catholic Church, to unite church and state. That was done at the time of Constantine I, where he united them together and he was representative of them both. That is what the Pope does today in the State of the Vatican, because remember, the Vatican is a double power state. It's a religious state and it's a civil state. The Pope is the president and he is also the leader of the religion. But that's what he wants to do over the whole world. Let's read the parts at the bottom. The Byzantine Empire, which was later the heir to the glories of the Roman Empire, followed exactly the same trajectory, preserving a Christian empire which was definitively established with Justinian between 527 and 565. So that was the moment when there was a change of power. The change of power was from the imperial Rome to the papal Rome. And that was the moment when there was a change, and that was prophesied, which is what we are looking about today. The power that was, that is not, yet is. Daniel 7:23-25 says, "Thus he said, The fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down, and break it in pieces. And the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise, and another shall arise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings. And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws. And they shall be given unto his hand until a time and times, and the dividing of time." So, this power would devour the whole earth. It was mentioning the Roman Empire, the strongest empire that there has been on this earth, the one that expanded most its territory. And it mentions the 10 horns. Just like the 10 horns that we read in Revelation. So there is a connection between the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation, so that we have to read them both to be able to understand them both. And it says that out of this kingdom 10 kings shall arise, and another shall rise after them, and after subduing 3 kings. 3 horns were going to fall, and 1 little horn was going to be born of the fall of these 3 horns. And it said that this power was going to change the times and laws, and it was going to have authority during a certain period of time. This is the beast, an image of the beast represented in the prophecy. The most horrendous beast that there has been upon this earth, and that there is, with those 10 horns. But 3 were going to fall. What are those 10 horns? The 10 horns were mentioning precisely the the Germanic tribes of the time of when the Roman Empire fell. And these were the ones that were forming the European nations. We have the Suebi, the Visigoths, the Lombards, the Burgundians, the Franks, Anglo-Saxons, the Alemanni, the Heruli, the Vandals, the Ostrogoths. These are the European nations at that time. And the Roman Empire was falling. But eventually it gained power, and it had to subdue 3 of these powers. And those were the Heruli, the Vandals, and the Ostrogoths. Daniel 7:24 said, "And the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise, and another shall rise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings." In the year 493, the Herulian kingdom falls to Theodoric, envoy of the Emperor Zeno. In 527, Justinian ascends as Eastern Roman Emperor with his general Belisarius. And in the year 533, the Vandals fall to Belisarius. 8 Europeans nation remain. There were still 8, but the prophecy said that 3 were going to fall. 3 were going to fall by this Roman Empire, this papal Rome, that eventually was going to gain power and was going to establish its power, unifying church and state once again. So 1 was fallen in 493, and the other was fallen in 533, but 1 was left. Justinian, in the year 533, after conquering, he said, "We do not allow anything concerning the state of the churches, even if it is manifest and undoubted, to be dealt with without it, also being known to your holiness, who is the head of all the holy churches, establishing what was it to be believed, establish the unity between Christianity, but 1 was going to lead them all. In everything, as has been said, we hasten to increase the honor and authority of your see." So Justinian was the Roman emperor. That was the one that gave all the civil power to the Pope at that time. He was the one that was saying, "You are the one that are going to lead this empire." That was the precise moment when the Roman Empire changed to papal Rome, and its character was made different, with the same way of working, but in a religious power. And in the year 538, the Ostrogoths retreat, defeated from Roman territory. That was the moment when the 3rd horn fell, and the little horn was going to grow from them. in 538 AD. But what did the prophecy say? That when this new power was going to be born, a power born from something apparently small, but that had a big mouth, that was going to say great blasphemies and say everything against the God of this earth and persecute the saints. The prophecy said, "And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws, and they shall be given unto his hand until a time and times, and the dividing of time." Inquisition and Counter-Reformation. So, this is the moment when they start to gain their power. The prophecy said that they were going to wear out the saints of the Most High. They were going to persecute, kill, murder, assassinate, torture, all of those that did not want to follow the creed that they were going to establish and enforce. So who do we have? We have the Waldenses, the Albigensians, the Cathars, Tyndale, Wycliffe, John Hus, Martin Luther, Zwinglio, and along, etc., etc., etc. Thousands and millions of people that were tortured, that were martyred, that were persecuted, that were forced to go into caves, to run away, to flee from this Roman power. Until the moment that they managed to gain domain over all Europe, bit by bit. All of the rest of those 10 horns, the 7 horns that were left, eventually were obeying the Roman Catholic Church and their power. Up to the moment of today, that we have, for example, here a statue of Saint Ignatius of Loyola crushing Martin Luther. This is a statue of St. Nicholas Church in Malá Strana, which is in Prague. But he's using a lightning bolt to slaughter Martin Luther here. And in Luke 10:18 it says, "He replied, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven." So we can see here the satanic character of these people, because the Jesuits were precisely created to be able to do their counter-reformation. They were created to go against the Protestants that were trying to read the Bible and help others to understand the truth in it. So once again, the prophecy said that how long was it going to be able to wear out the saints of the Most High? For a time and times and the dividing of time. Well, it's a simple math. In prophecy, a time is a year, and times is in plural, it's 2 years. So 1 year, 2 years, and half of a year. That is 1,260 days. Curious, didn't we read this as 42 months in Revelation 13 at the beginning of this presentation? In the first part of it? 1,260 days, that's 360 days plus 720 days plus 180 days, which is half a year. 1,260 days, 42 months of persecution. But 3.5 years only? Or this is a prophetic year? Because in prophecy it says that it can be 1 day as a year. So we're talking about 1,260 years of persecution, where this power was going to wear out the saints. Beginning from when? From the moment that it gained power. From the moment when these 3 horns fell and the little horn grew after them. From 538 AD plus 1,260 years takes us to 1798 AD. What's happened at 1798 AD? Because the prophecy said that this power, the beast that was, that is not, yet is. It had power, it lost its power, and then would gain it again at the end times. So that it would receive a mortal wound. Something would happen to this power that it would apparently lose its power and then regain it in a different manner. It would use a different strategy to gain the New World Order. Revelation 13:3 said, "And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast." Well, in 1798, precisely by order of Napoleon, General Berthier was the one that incarcerated the Pope. And that was a moment when apparently the Roman Catholic Church fell. And people were saying, hallelujah, that finally, well, not hallelujah actually, because the people that were really grateful of incarcerating the Pope were atheists, most of them, especially in the French Republic at that time. But what happened eventually? That wound was going to be healed, and in the Treaty of Letrán, Mussolini in 1929 gave the Vatican state its land, its territory. At that moment, the Vatican was given a piece of land so that it could have its own state. for the first time, there was going to be a great, powerful ruling power that was going to have both powers, both religious and civil. And that is what we have today, the Vatican. So 1798, linking and connecting with the first part of this presentation, what do we see in this woman? Similarities of the Mother of God that we saw before, the false Christ worship, and the Mother of God as if she is God herself, Anahita, Ishtar, and all these Babylonian goddesses. Well, firstly, we can see that she has her breasts uncovered, just like these goddesses did also. And what is she wearing on her head? Isn't this the Phrygian cap? Isn't this the same hat that Mithra wore also? That we saw was involved in the Mithraic cult that eventually evolved into the Catholic Church? Was Catholicism involved in the French Revolution? Was Catholicism involved in its own fall that was prophesied in the Bible, that God knew that was going to happen? We will see. Where do we see this also? The Phrygian cap in this person. This was an opera singer. At the moment of the French Revolution, they enthroned a woman. They enthroned a woman called Sophie. And she was an opera singer. And it was a symbolism, a representation of the goddess of reason. Because they were overthrowing religion in their country, saying that they were a nation not under God, but under reason and under law and etc. The French Revolution. Curiously, Sophie is Sophia, and Sophia in Greek means knowledge. Wasn't Anahita the goddess of knowledge? So they were overthrowing a cult to the Mother God, to the Virgin Mary, to what is the religious Catholic cult. But they were enthroning another woman, but she is symbolizing the same thing. Exactly the same thing. Because this power, the beast, has the master ability of making people perceive this power in both manners. What do I mean? That she can camouflage and be an atheist power, as has been in the French Revolution, or can be also a religious power, because they control both sides, and as we will see now. So let's continue. This woman, Sophie, was enthroned in the parliament of the French Revolution at that moment, because they said that they will worship from now on only reason, man's reasoning. And she is wearing also a Phrygian cap. This symbol is relating us precisely to that Mithraic cult, that secret society. And what is she doing? She is stepping on top of a Christ with a red boot. Isn't there someone, or was there someone, that was famous for wearing always red shoes? And I'm not talking about Dorothy in the Wizard of Oz. I'm talking about the Pope. Benedict XVI, for example, was very famous for always wearing his little red shoes. And as we see here, once again, the red shoe symbol. And she is stepping on top of a Christ, remembering once again the hat of Mithra, the Phrygian cap, in front of the 33, number 33, and as we can see there at the back, sacrifice, because it's the window of Mithra in the museum in London. So who were the main instigators of the French Revolution? Was the Catholic Church involved in that wound that the beast was going to suffer because they needed a change of character? Satan knew that the prophecy was going to finish. He had a period of time, 1,260 years, to go against God's people, but then things had to change. So he had to get in advance and work for that change so that he could take the situation to eventually change in their character of work. Persecution would end. It would be more dialogue, more ecumenism, more let's let aside our differences and all work together, although I am the one that is in charge. The Jesuits were the main instigators of the French Revolution. History Today says the expulsion of the Jesuits from France in 1764. So a few decades before the French Revolution, Jesuits were expelled from France. So they had a vengeance for that country. They said, we are going to go back there and gain our power. And what happened in 1776, the German Jesuit, Adam Weishaupt, created the order of the Illuminati. With what purpose? The purpose of this order was to infiltrate Freemasonry at that time and take Protestant Freemasonry to a more Catholic perspective. That is what the infiltration of the Jesuits was done, and as we will see it now, and they were definitely involved in the French Revolution, because they were the turning point to take the different secret societies and countries to a more atheist perspective, to take people against God, which is also working in favor of them. There was going to be a change of moral at that time, and there is being one right now also. Their working is order through chaos. They would create chaos to eventually take their order, and they created chaos in France. They used the Jacobins also. What do we see at the top of the symbol of the Jacobins? Once again, the Phrygian cap. As we see here, their ideology was radicalism, illustration, revolutionary nationalism, soberanism, republicanism, anti-monarchism, anti-absolutism, anti-Christianity, anti-Catholicism, anti-clericalism, secularism, centralism, direct democracy, economic leadership, also liberalism, bourgeoism, well, all the isms that you can think that go against anything related to God. And that was the movement that they created. The Jesuits were behind this movement of the Jacobins. They created to provoke the French Revolution, to even incarcerate the Pope. Why? Because then the Jesuits eventually would get in the position of power. That is what they were looking for, to change the perspective, but they would be the ones that would be enthroned eventually. What do we see here? At the top, the Phrygian cap, once again. Liberty, equality, fraternity. It's the same slogan as the Freemasonic lodges. Égalité, liberté, fraternité. Liberty, equality, fraternity. The same spirit. The Illuminati were the ones that were infiltrating at that time in Freemasonic lodges and creating all this new perspective, changing people from Protestantism to more a Catholic perspective, and also generating these revolts and these movements to change from a religious perspective to a more atheist, to take people to another kind of way of living, of thinking, of moving in society. And what do we see here on one of these posters of the Jacobins? Precisely the all-seeing eye of the Illuminati. So yes, they were behind this movement. Voltaire was one of the ones that managed to influence the French country to be able to generate this French Revolution. And as we see here, Voltaire was a French writer, historian, philosopher and lawyer who belonged to the Freemasons and is considered one of the leading figures of the Enlightenment, a period that emphasized the power of human reason and science over religion. In 1746, Voltaire was elected a member of the French Academy, where he occupied seat number 33. What a coincidence. His efforts culminated in the Revolution of 1973, when the Bible was discarded and the existence of the deity denied. He had said, "I am tired of hearing people repeat that 12 men established the Christian religion. I will prove that one man can be enough to overthrow it." Well, he was quite bold, wasn't he? In what his goal was. Actually, there's someone in our modern times that said the exact same thing, and that was Marilyn Manson. Well, we can see that it's the same satanic character. This article, this document, is very interesting because it says about the family environment and early education of Voltaire. To begin with, Voltaire received a careful education in his youth at the Jesuit college Louis le Grand in Paris, from which he emerged very grateful for the cultural training he received there. It is true that the exact meaning of this and other statements by Voltaire is unclear. Given the sarcasm with which he always approached issues, especially those relating to religion, nor should we forget that, as Dan Graves says, his whole life was a paradox. He despised humanity and yet was passionately interested in men. He ridiculed the clergy and dedicated one of his books to the Pope. He mocked royalty, yet accepted a pension from King Frederick the Great. He hated intolerance, yet was intolerant in his attitude towards Jews. He mocked the vanity of wealth and acquired a great fortune, by means that were not always honest. He did not believe in God, and yet he spent his whole life searching for him. One of the synonyms for Jesuit is hypocrite. And as we can see here, the character of this man was a total hypocrite in his life, because he knew that he was working in public for one direction, but he had his own beliefs, as we will see. That he always maintained a Catholic mentality, or rather sensibility, is demonstrated by his own statements and behaviour that contradicted religion. For example, despite being a rabid anti-clerical, he always spoke well of his Jesuit teachers who instilled in him a love of literature, because he was a Jesuit himself. You do not need to be an ordained priest to be a Jesuit. You can work for them and pertain to the order. To further illustrate our point, his biographers report that he built a church next to his castle, on which he placed the inscription Dio erexit Voltaire, which is Voltaire built it for God, where he attended Mass on Sundays accompanied by several bodyguards. So he said to the public, no, I'm an atheist, I am working against the Catholic Church, against God, I do not want religion in my country, and I will write all the books and articles that I need to do to promote that movement. But in my private life, I am a Jesuit. I am a Jesuit servant. I pertain to the order. I belong to it. So the Phrygian cap of the Jacobins, we can see that the movement of it comes from even earlier, because this symbolism was taking us to the pagan moment of Mithraism and the Roman Empire. Where do we see it also? Well, in the Spanish Republic. If we remember the video at the beginning that we saw, what correlation were there between Babylon, Persia, the French Revolution, the Spanish Republic, the Jesuits, and this Phrygian cap? This red hat is joining it all together to see how the same people have worked chaos and order. Chaos and order. They have always managed both sides, the right wing and the left wing. They have managed revolutionary works, and they have managed the monarchies and all the establishments of the clergy. They are the same people. They managed both sides. What is the symbology of the Phrygian hat? The two Spanish republics, the 1873 and the 1931, had a single symbol, a woman, Marianne, more than evident influence of the French Revolution. Marianne. Weren't we talking about a woman? Anahita. And she was related to the Virgin Mary? Marianne. Interesting. Anna was also the name of the Virgin Mary's mother, said by Catholic tradition, not by the Bible. Marianne. A woman who gathered in herself the concept of republic and the concept of social justice, who in those times were seen as synonyms, and who carried in her head a Phrygian hat. So we have the same goddess in pagan Mithraism, but also in the French Republic and also in the Spanish Republic. It's repeated. They are worshipping the same thing without knowing it. Aren't they worshipping Satan himself through atheism and atheist movements? Are they worshipping the same thing that Catholic people are worshipping in their churches? It's the same symbolism, the same goddess. It says, the Marianne of the First Republic carries in her left hand the balance of justice, and on the right the law, represented in the form of the tablets that Moses received on Mount Sinai. As we see here, this is the figure of Marianne. And what do we see in her? The same as Anahita. She has one breast uncovered. But in this moment, she is holding the law. But what law is this? Is this the law of God? These are movements that are going against God, against Christianity. The Marianne of the Second Republic, for her part, also bears the balance of justice and is accompanied by a lion. Now this must sound familiar if we are paying attention. A lion. We were talking about a woman with lions. The symbol of force. The two Spanish Mariannes of justice have something else in common, apart from the scales, a Phrygian hat, the main garment of the French Revolution, as we said. Here we have the second one. A woman with a lion and a Phrygian hat. What do we see down here at the bottom? Libertad, igualdad, fraternidad. Grand Lodge of symbolic of Spain. This is a Freemason lodge here in Spain, and it says the same. Liberty or libertad, igualdad y fraternidad. The same thing as we saw before. Freemasonry were also involved in these movements. But who were the ones that were taking control of Freemasonry? The Illuminati. Who were the ones that created the Illuminati? The Jesuits. The same people once and again. So very careful with nationalist movements, with revolutionary movements, as is happening today, for example, in the US. Movements that are taking to a nationalist, right-wing movement, to a more conservative side. Once again, we have another picture of this woman. This woman that is worshipped, as we see, if we take a look at the people, the women that are on both sides, they are kneeled down to this woman. The men, on the other hand, are moving away. So feminism is also one of these movements that is related to the mother god, to this goddess, the goddess of fertility, of sexuality, of deprivation. This is the movement of feminism also. We see it here, represented so many decades ago. And if we take a look at this woman here, we can see that she is the same one. She is the same woman with the Phrygian cap. We can even see a pair of wings on her sides, represented by those flags beside her. But if we join these symbols together, don't we have Anahita? The lion, the wings, the crown, the breast, everything is representing the same goddess worshipped by the Catholic Church, by the Roman Empire, by Babylon. It is the same false goddess. Ishtar, Anahita, Artemis, Diana. It's always the same figure. But these were representing someone, as I said before, that really existed. She truly existed. And we will talk about this in future presentations. Ishtar, once again, she is the same woman. The Republican sentiment was established by the female face of Spanish La Mariana, a symbol of national identity. The Second Republic's interest in French revolutionary iconography was already evident in 1873 when the First Republic was proclaimed. Tomás Pedro Pedret, illustrator for La Flaca magazine, was commissioned to create an allegory of the Republic, using a series of motifs typical of French revolutionary iconography. The famous effigy with one breast exposed was adopted by the Republic with the aim of awakening the revolutionary fervor that the well-known French Marianne inspired in people's hearts. She was named after the Spanish philosopher and Jesuit Juan de Mariana, who developed ideas such as tyrannicide and the right to resist oppression. It was the counter-revolutionaries who pejoratively named the revolutionaries Marianos. In her honor, and out of pride in being Mariana, the French effigy would become known throughout the world as Marianne. Mary Anne, the goddess of fertility, of wisdom and of war. Tomás Pedro's Spanish La Mariana shares many characteristics with her French counterpart, one of these distinctive figures being the Phrygian cap. So, another representation of this woman. What is she doing here? The same as Sophia was doing in the French Revolution. The goddess of reason, the goddess of wisdom, because remember, Sophia means wisdom. And if we think, the goddess of wisdom was also Athena. And Theda, what did she have beside her or on her shoulder? She had an owl. Interesting, because wisdom is referred to the owl. Doesn't Ishtar, for example, have an owl? Inanna? All these goddesses are related. They are the same person. And on the right, we see she is stepping on a book. And on the left, she is stepping on a Christ. So this means that she is stepping on what kind of book? On a dictionary? On an encyclopedia? She is stepping on top of the Bible. And in her hand, she has the law. Definitely, this is not God's law, the Ten Commandments. So if we remember Mithra, Mitre, he had on his head these sun rays, also as the Phrygian cap. If we join these two images together, don't we have the Statue of Liberty? How did the Statue of Liberty end up in the United States? It was precisely given by the French as a gift to the US. So who gave this present to the United States? The Jesuits gave this present to the United States, saying, we are going there. Why? Because the first thing that we mentioned in this conference, in this presentation, was this power despises freedom of conscience. And that country was a great fighter of freedom of conscience. I say was because eventually it will speak like a dragon. Where do we see this Phrygian cap? Isn't this Papa Smurf? When we looked at the different levels and grades of the Mithraic order, wasn't it the Pater, the one that wore the Phrygian cap in the Mithra cult? The father, and here we see it in Father Smurf wearing a Phrygian cap. Father Christmas wearing a Phrygian cap. And when does Father Christmas come? 25th of December. Just like Mithra was born, apparently. Who else? Here we see Pope Clement X wearing also what seems like a Phrygian cap. Doesn't he look much like Santa Claus himself? He does, doesn't he? So let's take a look at Marianne in its symbology. Under the guise of a woman wearing a Phrygian cap, Marianne embodies the French Republic and represents the permanence of the values of the Republic and French citizens: liberty, equality and fraternity. Marianne is the symbolic representation of the fiery warrior-like, peaceful and protective motherland. Doesn't this sound also a bit like feminism movement? The origins of Marianne, although uncertain, seem to lie in the representations of the artist Honoré Daumier in 1848 as a mother caring for two children, Romulus and Remus. Wow, I mean, when all of these symbolisms, the names, they all have a connection and link up. It's amazing how if you just follow one simple red hat, you can see how everything is connected. Persian Mithraic cult, to Babylon, to the Roman Empire, to the French Revolution, to the Spanish Republic, and even here also to Rome itself, to what is Remus and Romulus, to the mother of Rome, the mother of harlots. This is taking us directly to the Great Babylon that we mentioned at the beginning. The effigy of Marianne is also representative of the liberal Masonic movement known as the Grand Orient de France. And on the right here we have a Masonic Marianne and a bust of Marianne, the revolutionary one. So we have a Marianne, a revolutionary one. We have, which would be an atheist power, left wing. We have a Marianne right wing power, religious. And we have a Masonic power, secret society power, spiritualist power. Everything links together. Masonic temple, Alexander's tomb, Basilica of San Lorenzo, Florence, Ark of Titus, Rome. All of them worshipping this goddess, the Mother of God. Jacobin and Revolutionary Freemasonry, this is interesting. It says, the Venerable himself, by the way, the Venerable in the Great Orient of France in the Freemasonic Lodge is the Grand Master, the leader of the lodge. The leader of the lodge himself wears a Phrygian cap in the Grand Orient Freemason Lodge. So as we can see again, this symbol links up together. It links secret societies, atheist movements, it links all of the revolutionary movements, nationalist movements, but also the Catholic Church. But where do we see that it is moving to? In the middle we see the seal of the Army of the United States. And on the right we see the seal of the Senate of the United States. This means that this power, the Jesuits, were going to go for that country. They gave the country that Statue of Liberty, that goddess, their mark, the one that they are worshipping, which is a symbol of Satan himself. And they were going to infiltrate the United States, gain domain over that country, get into the Senate, gain domain over the military, to be able to unite what they want, church and state, and implement and enforce the mark of the beast. That is what they are working for, and that is what we will continue seeing in the next part. To finish, Daniel 7:25 said about this power that it would think to change times and laws. Well, if we take a look at the Ten Commandments, the law of God, we will say that it changes or changed for them the times and the laws. The first commandment, thou shalt have no other gods before me. In Catholic Catechism, it says, thou shalt love God above all things. And you can say, okay, well, the first one is quite similar. It's more or less the same. Let's take a look at the second one. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image. In Catholic religion, it says, "Thou shalt not take the name of God in vain." What happened? It's disappeared. Obviously, they needed to make this commandment disappear in their religion so that they could worship all the images and idols that they have. So they just eliminated it. Well, if they eliminate a commandment, that means instead of 10 they have 9, doesn't it? Well, they must have done something. Let's continue. The third one, "Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain." The third Catholic one, "Thou shalt keep holy the Sabbath." So they've eliminated one, so their commandments have been placed up one position. But it says, "Keep holy the Sabbath." Which Sabbath? Well, the fourth commandment in the true commandments in Exodus 20 says, "Remember the Sabbath day, which is the seventh." The seventh day of the Sabbath is Saturday. And as we saw, they have the day of the sun worship, Sunday. They changed the law, but they changed the times also, because the time is the seventh day Sabbath, Saturday, not the first day of the week. It continues, "Their fourth commandment, thou shalt honor thy father and thy mother." The fifth commandment of God, honor your father and your mother. The fifth commandment, that is the Catholic one, thou shalt not kill. The sixth commandment, you shall not murder. Their sixth commandment, thou shalt not commit adultery. The seventh says, you shall not commit adultery. The eighth, you shall not steal. The ninth, you shall not hear false witness. And the 10th, you shall not covet. And theirs, the seventh says, thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not bear false witness or lie. And the 9th and the 10th is the same as the 10th, but separated in two. The commandment in Exodus 20 says, you shall not covet anything, nothing of thy neighbor, nor the woman of thy neighbor, or anything of thy neighbor. And in the Catholic one, they separate it in two to be able to get 10 once again. The 9th says, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house. And the 10th says, thou shalt not covet anything that is thy neighbor's. So as we can see, it's even amazing how they can do this, and it passes on for centuries, and people do not realize that they have cheated, that they have changed God's law, and they are trying to be God themselves here on earth. So conclusion. The Bible prophesied how imperial Rome would become papal Rome, uniting church and state. The Catholic Church, founded on rites of Babylonian origin, would persecute anyone who read the Bible, even infiltrating governments, generating anti-Christian movements, revolutions, and civil wars, order through chaos. Finally, prophecy tells us that the Vatican will once again unite with an empire, attacking freedom of conscience by imposing the mark of the beast. The empire that was prophesied as the second beast in Revelation 13 was going to be infiltrated, and they were going to use it as their hand, as their weaponized hand, to be able to enforce the mark of the beast. To finish, this quote from one of the encyclicals of Pope Gregory XVI in 1832. It says like this: "Nor can we predict happier times for religion and government from the plans of those who desire vehemently to separate the church from the state, and to break the mutual concord between temporal authority and the priesthood. It is certain that that concord which always was favourable and beneficial for the sacred and the civil order is feared by the shameless lovers of liberty." So if you are a lover of liberty, then to them you are shameless and you are not worthy of even your own life. That is what they believe. Because if you read Catholic writings of that time, not so long ago, 19th century, they were already saying that we are not even worthy of our own lives, and that we should be punished and brought to the civil authorities so that they can punish us for being heretics. Point 14 says, "This shameful front of indifferentism gives rise to that absurd and erroneous proposition which claims that liberty of conscience must be maintained for everyone. It spreads ruin in sacred and civil affairs." So this is blasphemy for them, to be able to have freedom of conscience when God does not force anyone to believe in Him. The truth is there, you can make your own decision, but there is something that is sacred to God, and that is free will, and that is something that we must respect, even those that consciously will take the decision to put the mark of the beast, to follow the mark of the beast, and put on the sign of the mark of the beast, which we will talk about what it is. So we'll finish here. I know that these parts have been quite extensive, a lot of reading, a lot of information, but we can see here how through symbols they have carried on doing their plans, and through symbols we can discover them and find out who are the people that have always been the ones in charge. And this beast that was, that is not, yet is, continues in power, and it will gain even more until it will rule over the whole world for a short period of time. So we'll leave it here until the next part to be able to continue unraveling how the Jesuits infiltrated that country with proof to see through history how eventually they got to the point where we are today, and how they grabbed that country with strength and said, we are going to dominate and you are going to work for us. We will put our politicians there, we will be in the courts, we will be the judges, we will be in the Senate, we will be in the military, and you will be in our hands. And freedom of conscience will be eliminated for once. That is what they are working for, and they will get it for a short period of time. So until the next time, we'll leave it here. Here you have the Great Deception channel. Share, comment, like, and participate if you find this interesting. Until next time.